Aaron Tomlinson, and I want to thank you for joining me for this video. It's been a while since I put some of these out. I've been crazy busy. The summer and the fall was just incredibly intense and busy for me, and I haven't had a lot of time to sit down and make these, but I think things are slowing down for me, and I'm looking forward to producing some more. And I've been thinking about what topic do I want to talk about, do I want to cover in this particular season. And I've been doing a lot more reading and practicing and working with what people call the law of attraction. And so I wanted to do some law of attraction videos, but I didn't want to use the phrase law of attraction because there's so much teaching and so much available on the law of attraction. And I was trying to think about how we could talk about and describe what is the law of attraction a little bit differently. So I'm going to do a series of teachings on magic, what it is and how it works. Now, let me just be clear. When I'm using the term magic, I'm not talking about making blood sacrifices, killing chickens. I'm not talking about fetishes and hexes and all that kind of stuff. Because I realize that for a lot of people in our culture, the word magic, particularly if you come from a Christian background or a Catholic background, has a very negative connotation. You get the idea of working with demons, like I said, blood sacrifices, putting hexes and curses on people. And I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about magic as the ability to use your consciousness, to use your will, your desire, and your belief to create change in the natural world. You could say magic is prayer that actually works, that actually changes things. But when you look at the principles that Jesus taught, the principles that are revealed in the Bible, and you compare that with other cultures and other spiritual traditions, you begin to find some things that are very similar. Even when you compare it with the law of attraction, there are things that are very, very similar. In other words, there are principles that guide the use of our consciousness to create change in the natural world. And every culture has their masks, if you will, and by that I mean the dressing that they put it in, the language, the methodology, but it all comes back to some very basic principles. And a lot of these principles are things that are being taught in the law of attraction. And so when I'm talking about magic, that's what I'm talking about, the ability to create change. Now, I could use different terms. I could call it the law of attraction, and that would appeal to people who are following that particular genre of information and body of knowledge. Or if I wanted to appeal just to my Christian audience, I would call it faith. For years, I taught magic, but we called it faith. And faith worked. But here's our problem. Any spiritual culture that you look at, going all the way back to ancient shaman, to Native American religions, folk religions, Hinduism, even Islam, has forms of magic and spiritual phenomenon where they experience other beings and where they're able to create change in the natural world. We just use different language to talk about it. So I hope you won't get hung up on the labels. But I want to use this illustration of magic, law of attraction, faith, to talk about, I think, the very first principle of magic or the law of attraction. And that principle was illustrated in a book called Science and Sanity that was written by a man named Alfred Korzybski. And he made famous the phrase, "The map is not the territory." Now, when Korzybski's talking about the map, he's talking about specifically language. And the territory is the experience. So we all have experiences, and then in order to communicate those experiences, we have to use words or language to describe the experience or the phenomena that we are wanting to communicate to someone else. But the language is merely a symbol for the reality. So if I were to say to you, imagine an apple. Imagine an apple. For most of us, we're not going to see the letters A-P-P-L-E in our mind. For most of us, what's immediately going to come to mind probably is fruit. And so we may think of a green apple or a red apple. I suppose if you're really into computers and technology, you might think about a computer. So you can see how even language, sometimes there are barriers in what we're communicating. I might say apple and be thinking about a computer and not be descriptive enough. And the phenomena that I'm communicating to the other person has to do with the technology or vice versa. So I hope you can see what I'm saying. Now, remember, Korzybski's book was called Science and Sanity. And so what Korzybski postulated was that if a person confuses the map with the territory, the description for the thing itself, then they're entering into a realm of insanity or into a realm of unreality. So here's how this would work, practical illustration. Let's say I wanted to go to California, and let's say I wanted to drive. And let's say this was back before the times of GPS. Now, GPS is a wonderful gift to people who have horrible sense of direction like myself. But back in the old days, we had to get out a map, which was a drawing of the streets and highways and things that we would need to take, the avenues that we would need to take to get from where we are to where we want to be. And we would have to get that map in our mind, and then we would have to take action based on that map. And if we followed the map accurately, or let me say it this way, if the map was accurate to the territory and we followed the map, we could end up in the city of San Francisco, for example. Now, to confuse the map with the territory is to lay the map out on my floor, stand on the spot on the map that says San Francisco, and then look around and say, I'm in San Francisco. Now, that's crazy, we know that, to do that, but unfortunately, oftentimes, we confuse the description, the language, the semantics with the territory, and that messes us up. Because language can often have triggers in it. So if you come from a Judeo-Christian background, or you come from a belief system that says that magic is evil, so anyone who talks about magic, anyone who uses the term magic, is talking about something demonic or something evil, and you just get triggered by the word magic, guess what? You're experiencing confusion between the territory and the map. Let me give another example for my Christian listeners. Our scriptures tell us in the New Testament, talking about the saving work of Jesus Christ, that whoever calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Whoever calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Now, to an English-speaking Christian, the name of the Lord in the New Testament sense is Jesus. Jesus. Now, if I went to another part of the world where they speak Spanish, if I went to Mexico or Central America, the name of the Lord would be Jesus. Now, those are pronounced totally differently. Jesus, Jesus. And think about it, it's not just writing the name of the Lord that saves you, it's calling on the name of the Lord that saves you. So if I make the sounds Jesus, am I calling upon the name of the Lord? If I make the sounds Jesus, am I calling upon the name of the Lord? To make it even more interesting, if you were living in Palestine in ancient times, the time of Jesus, and Jesus is walking around, you see Jesus walking by, and you say, hey, Jesus, you start crying out to him, he's not even going to turn around, because that was not the man's name. The man's name was Yeshua. So if you want to get his attention in the time in which he actually walked the earth, you'd have to call him Yeshua, because Jesus, that name, hadn't even been invented yet. And if you want to make it even more complicated, when it says call upon the name of the Lord, it's quoting from the Old Testament. And in the Old Testament, the word Lord there is Yahweh. So which is it? Is it calling upon Yahweh? Is it calling upon Yeshua? Is it calling upon Jesus? Is it calling upon Jesus? See, all of that is just symbols and sounds that we use as a map to reference a particular phenomena. So the phenomena in this case would be the person of Yeshua, or the person of Jesus, or the person of Jesus. We all know the phenomena that we're talking about, even though we're using different semantics, different sounds, and a different coding, if you will, in order to describe the phenomena. So please don't let the term magic hang you up. Because if you're going to be able to get into magical states of consciousness and states of mind that really work, you have to understand the map, the sounds, the language, the semantics is not the territory. In order to get into those places, you have to be able to transcend that. You have to be able to transcend and understand the difference. What is map and what is territory? So the map that we have, our map, is the way that we think, because we think in pictures, we think in feelings, we think in sounds, sometimes we think in smells. You ever smell something like cookies baking and it reminds you of being at grandma's in your childhood? So we have words, even me just describing that might trigger a childhood memory for you. So what we do is we link our language to our experience, and that's why language can be triggers. Somebody who knows about magic and has used it and has been blessed by it, if I say the word magic, they're not going to be triggered. Somebody who has no experience with magic, has done no research on it, and just has heard and read in the Bible that it's bad and it's evil, and I use the term magic, they're going to be triggered and think, oh, that guy's evil, that guy's from the devil, he's talking about the demonic. See, it's the meaning that you give to the word based upon your experience, your subjective experience, that is important. Now let's take this a little bit further. The truth is that we project our consciousness onto reality all the time. All the time. And our internal map and its interaction with the territory, or its interaction with what's really out there. So when we're talking about the map, we're talking about our beliefs, our feelings, and our language that we use to describe experience. That's the map. It's subjective and it's internal. And then reality is whatever is out there that really exists. So what we have then is an interaction between our states of being and what's really going on out here, and the two working together formulate our experiences. Let me give you an example. We're coming out of the Halloween season, and in the Halloween season they often show, people watch horror movies and they kind of get into that, whatever. And I was listening to a radio program just a couple of days ago, and they were talking about childhood experiences with horror movies and things like that. And somebody called in and told the story about a 6-year-old whose parents let him watch the movie Chucky. Now, I don't know why any parent wants to let their 6-year-old watch that movie. And if you don't know about the movie, I've never seen it myself, but if you don't know about the movie, this little doll, this little puppet, is turned into this animated psycho killer doll. Now, this is really playing on childhood imagination because kids will take dolls and they'll animate them. They'll bring them to life. They'll pretend like they're a living entity. They'll give them names. They'll talk to them. The doll will talk back to them and whatever. And it's meant to be fun. And as long as it's kept with that meaning and with that context and that language, then their experience of that doll is fun. Same thing with clowns. Clowns are meant to be something that kids enjoy, something that they like, something that's fun for them. But then horror movie makers come along and they create a movie, or they create an experience where a doll, something that's supposed to be a toy and fun for the kids, becomes something murderous and something scary. Or the clown, you can think of Pennywise the clown in the movie's It. The clown becomes something that lures kids in order to kill and destroy them. And so a child is exposed to those experiences through the movie, and the intent, watch this, the intent behind the movie maker is to create a scary experience for the person. So back to the story from the radio. They talked about this 6-year-old who watched the movie Chucky and went to bed that night and started freaking out because he was scared there was something in his closet. He saw lights or eyes in his bedroom. He saw shadows moving because of cars going by out the window. And all of a sudden he sees that shadow and he's like, oh my God, there's something there. There's the boogeyman in the closet. There's something under the bed. And he comes running into his parents' bedroom, shaking and trembling, scared to death, and spends the next 3 months sleeping in bed with mom and dad. So I guess that'll teach mom and dad to let their 6-year-old watch Chucky. But here's the point. The night before that, the child went to bed and slept peacefully. He'd see the same shadows with the cars going by the window. He would have the same closet with the same toys in it. He might hear the same sounds in the house creaking, but it did not create an experience of fear and terror for the child. But when the child watches the movie, the intent, the meaning, the information, and the energy is transferred to the child. And the child internalizes that. So now the child goes to bed with different information, with different emotions, and with different meaning, a different map, if you will, a different state of consciousness. Goes to bed afraid now instead of feeling peaceful and safe. And so what happens is the night before he watched the movie, he's projecting. I mean, there could have been a boogeyman in the closet. There could have been something spooky in his room, but he wasn't aware of it. And so he's going to bed in that peaceful state of consciousness, and that dictates the experience he has of his own bedroom. But when he watches the movie, now he's got the energy of fear. Now he's got the energy of the associations with all this stuff. And so his internal experience, his consciousness has literally shifted and changed based on the intention of the people who made the movie. So they communicated their intention. They took their intention, they created something, they put it out there, and they changed experience for people. In this case, the child. Now the child goes to bed and he or she's projecting their own experience into the reality. They're projecting the map onto the territory, and now there's something scary and I've got to get out of here. And so even though it was the same bedroom and even though it was perfectly safe, the experience was so transformed that the person's life and consciousness shifted, was so transformed, their experience completely changed. I think that's something all of us can relate to. I remember watching a vampire movie when I was a young kid, and that vampire movie scared me to death. And so I started finding crosses and wearing them around my neck, putting them up against the window on my door. I learned about vampires so I could learn how to protect myself from vampires. But there were no vampires out there. There were no vampires coming to get me. And I didn't even think about vampires till I saw the movie. But now all of a sudden, because of the transference of consciousness from the movie maker into me, now my reality's changed, my actions are changed, everything that I'm doing is different. So here's the point. We project our consciousness onto reality all the time. We project things that are there sometimes. We project things that aren't there. And there's this interplay and mixture of it. And so if you're going to be able to effectively use the laws of attraction or use the laws of magic to bring change in the physical world, you have to understand the impact of your own consciousness upon your own experience. And you have to know when you're projecting your thoughts and feelings and experiencing something out there as being real, but it's not out there in reality. It's out there in a projection of your own consciousness. That's the first step. So I hope that's helpful for you. I hope that made sense for you. I'm going to be doing some more videos on this. So the principle I want to leave you with is the map is not the territory. Don't get hung up on semantics. We can use language. I refuse to surrender the power of language because of people's triggers. We can use language, magic for instance, to talk about how we can use our consciousness to bring change in ourselves and to bring change in our experience. The reality is that horror movies produce magic all the time. Beer commercials produce magic all the time. You ever watch a beer commercial or you see an ad for Budweiser, you walk into a store, there's an ad for Budweiser and there's a sexy woman in her bikini, or there's all these really hot, sexy people, men and women in the beer commercials. And you think, what in the world does being sexy have to do with beer? Because if you drink too much beer, if you drink too much Budweiser, chances are pretty good you're going to lose that girlish figure or that boyish figure. You're not going to have six-pack abs. You're going to have more like a keg ab or something. And so in reality, there's no real correlation between drinking beer and having this really skinny body, right? But they're working on people's sex drives. They understand that biologically, when you see a beautiful person or you see something, you see some kind of sexual imagery, your body can't help but release sexual hormones and you have an arousal, even if it's slight. And then the way the brain works is it makes associations. So what they're doing is they're associating a state of arousal with their product in the hopes that when you walk into the store and you see the product, it will trigger the same state of arousal. And so in the same way that you desire sex, you're going to desire their product. And it works. So in essence, they did magic on you. They had an intention to sell their product. They put something out. They created something and put something out that shifted your state of consciousness and did it unconsciously, did it manipulatively, really. And in essence, you end up buying their product. That's a form of magic. Actually, it's a very low form of black magic because you're being manipulated subconsciously by the intent, the thought, and the imagination of the author in order for the author to get the outcome that they want. So I hope that makes sense to you. I'm looking forward to doing these. In our next episode, we'll be talking about the 3 main components of magic. I hope you'll join me for that. If you haven't subscribed to my videos and you're interested in following this, please hit the subscribe button at the bottom and click on the little alarm so that you'll know when I'm posting them. And honestly, my intention, my magic, is to be putting more of these out here for you, and I hope they'll be a blessing to you. And wherever you are, whatever time it is, I hope it's great.